It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Hey, today I want to talk about Ricoh's financials. Their year ended for 2020 in March of 2021, just like our friends over at Conica. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was going through Ricoh's financials, man, I got to the IT section and I started reading what they were writing, and I was just getting a little bit concerned. That same concern I had for our friends over at Conica. And I'm starting to see this as a trend. As I look at all the OEMs, as I look at some of the major mega dealers around the world and how they're describing IT services and how they're projecting out revenues, and it's just, quite honestly, it's a little disturbing. But before I get into the financials for Ricoh and discuss my fears of IT services and that deliverable for the OEMs and the mega dealers, I want to share a story that I imagined, so I need you all to put your imagination cap on and let's go play golf. The year is 2019, the month is June. You're on the golf course with an executive from Conica and an executive from Ricoh. And you're playing golf and you're talking about the industry's past, the industry's present, and the industry's future. And the Conica executive says, you know, when I do my projections for the year 2021, I'm going to project $1 billion less in revenue than we did in the year 2018. And then the Ricoh executive says, yeah, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to project $1 billion less for the year 2021 than we did in the year 2018. Boy, it's hard to even imagine a conversation like that, isn't it, my friends? But in reality, that's exactly what both those organizations did. Last week, when I recapped Conica's financials, their projections were $1 billion less for 2021 than they did in 2018. And today, it's the same thing with Ricoh. When I looked at what they did in 2018 and what they project to do in 2021, it's $1 billion less. And so you have to ask yourself the question, why? Why? Why is the revenue continuing to decline? Well, we all know the answer, because the industry is in decline. And the majority of those two organizations is print business and services and supplies around print. We all know that, right? They have diversified into IT services, but they're not knocking it out of the park with IT. And the things that Ricoh's doing with IT services are scary at best. I'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's pull up Ricoh's financials. And here they are, my friend. I just want to go to the main page here, their flash report. I'm not going to go through 31 pages of financials. I'm going to share about 4 or 5 with you. But I think it's interesting, and I think we need to be paying attention to a serious trend around our IT services aspirations for the folks in the Document Imaging channel. Without any further ado, let me get my shartboard working here, get my magic pen going. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you know, Ricoh is a substantial organization. I mean, their revenues for the year 2020 were 1,682 billion yen, which that translates, my friends, to $15.5 billion. So Ricoh is a $15.5 billion organization. That's nothing to sneeze at. Their operating profit for the year 2020 was minus 45.4 billion yen, which means Ricoh lost $413 million. So last year, Ricoh lost $413 million. Now let's talk about their projections for the year 2021, which will end in March of 2022. Their aspirations for top-line revenue are 1,910 billion yen, which translates to $17.3 billion. So Ricoh wants to increase its revenue by $1.8 billion. That's a pretty good, right? We want to increase their revenue, $1.8 billion. They also want to increase their operating profit from a loss of $413 million to a gain of $459 million. So $459 million is what they want their operating profit to be. Folks, if you factor in the $413 million loss, that means they have to have a betterment, and I talked about this with Conica as well, but that betterment is $872 million. They have to improve their operating profit from the year 2020 by $872 million. That's a lot of money. They're only increasing their sales aspirations by $1.8 billion, but they're going to increase their operating profit by $872 million. That's a lot. What will they cut? Will they close some more offices? Folks, the OEM's got to make some serious adjustments to the way they go to market. Back in 2017, Ricoh shed themselves to a lot of their direct operations. We see Conica doing the same. I think Konicka's already shed about 9 offices. I think personally they should have ripped the Band-Aid off like Ricoh and done them all at once. I expect Konicka any day now, any week now, to start shedding some more of those offices. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to go to a page in these financials where they talk about their IT services business. We understand in the Document Imaging channel all the ramifications around print, right? We know that we're switching from A3 to A4. We know the dollars are going to decrease as we go from A3 to A4. We know the service volumes are decreasing because volumes are decreasing. All these things we already know and we understand it, or we should. But when you're projecting $1 billion less dollars, doesn't that tell you that you can't run around and hope that you're going to, take this existing MIF that you have, machines in the field, and increase the revenue with that by selling more machines, print devices? It's not working, is it? Regardless how you reclassify the contract and call it managed print services, it doesn't matter how you do it. It's a shrinking industry. The only way you're going to grow your revenues and your profits is what? You got to add more services. You got to add more deliverable. If you think about Konicka and Ricoh, both of those organizations went to that diversity supermarket and bought some stuff. Konicka, penetration testing, security services, voice over IP. Ricoh's doing the same things. Ricoh doesn't talk about security. I couldn't find it anywhere, which scares me a little bit. But if you think about Ricoh and Konicka, they diversified the most of all the OEMs. And during this global pandemic, couldn't they have sold more IT services? So let's go to that page and let me show you some things here, ladies and gentlemen, which are a little bit disturbing because I see a trend as I look at all the players in the space. The first thing I want to do is I want to talk about the categories real quick. Ricoh, just like Konicka, has business segments or categories. For the purposes of what we're talking about today, I just want to focus on office printing and office services, okay? They also have a commercial printing, industrial printing, a thermal media, and other. Let's not worry about that today. I want to talk about the things that 90% of the folks in the Document Imaging channel care about. That's services, IT services in that space, and print equipment, managed print services, all the stuff we care about. They classify office printing as MFPs, multifunctional printers, copier, laser printers, digital duplicators, wide format printers, facsimile machines, scanners, related parts and supplies, services, support, and software. And then they have the category that's called office services. Personal computers, servers, network equipment, related services, support, software, and services, and solutions related to documents. And this is where it gets me every single time because they have to lump these solutions related to documents inside their IT services. And then they hope that document revenue, exceeds all the other stuff they don't know anything about or they struggle delivering. So let's just put it in the document services in there. Let's throw that in the IT services. Ladies and gentlemen, you could talk to a whole lot of IT services companies. It would take you a long, long time to find one that could even articulate workflow in their conversation around IT security services, IT assessments. They don't go to customers and say, we want to talk to you about workflow. We want to talk to you about document management. Ladies and gentlemen, IT service providers don't even care about those things. They really don't. They know that the documents were born in the computer world or the digital landscape, and they know that end users want to keep them behind glass more and more. They may vendor manage a document management solution for their client, but they're sure as hell not selling them that solution, and they're sure as hell not supporting that solution, other than a vendor management support. But the Document Imaging channel, they think IT services is all about document imaging, and workflows, and documents. It's not, folks. And until we can change that thinking, we're never going to be successful in IT services. But here's something that's concerning to me. We're showing what these categories are today. But in April of 2021, guess what happened? Ricoh decided to make a change. I'm going to show you that change. They came over here and they said, we're going to call these things different things. Digital services. Let me read you what they're going to categorize as digital services. Sale of MFPs, multifunctional printers, laser printers, digital duplicators, wide format printers, facsimile machines, scanners, personal computers, servers, network equipment, related parts and supply services, support and service and solutions related to documents. Ladies and gentlemen, they just took their entire IT services business, which they had separated somewhat. No details around that separation. They didn't really tell you what they did in each individual category, like what do they do in telephony, what do they do in networks, what do they do in IT services, what's the reoccurring revenue just for services. They never really shared those numbers. They just lumped it all together. But now they're going to lump it all together with print, which is so concerning. And here they are, they're talking about digital services, and there's not one mention of security. There's not one mention of assessment services. No, they're mentioning document solution services. Services and solutions related to documents. This is how we define IT services at Ricoh. Really? This is a problem. Because if they weren't dissecting all these different deliverables around IT prior to this change, do you really think they're going to do it now? No. They're going to hope like hell they can sell a whole lot of MFPs and a whole lot of document mall or DocuWare that they bought. Ladies and gentlemen, this is some scary stuff. You know, when Ricoh bought Mindshift was about, I think they were about, I wrote it down over here, they were an $85 million company when they bought them. $85 million company. It would be really nice to know what Mindshift's revenues are today. I think it's 6 years later. What are those same store sales? When they bought DocuWare was a $67 million company. They just did that in 2019. But here's something I want you to pay attention to. Let me show this other slide here. This is how we looked at the financials for the year 2020, which ended in March of 2021. This was before the change that they're going to make for this coming year. So they classified office services as everything outside of print. Okay, equipment. So the print equipment, the print services for the equipment, the supplies, that was all in office printing. Office services was their IT services, their telephony services, things they did that didn't have to do with print. Of course, they still had the workflow and the document management inside office services, because that's really what they understand IT to be, I think. But folks, if you think about it, this year, you know, this year ended in March of 2021, so this is their 2020 year. Their sales in service sector decreased by 4.5% to 532.3 billion yen, which translates to $4.8 billion. So they're saying they have an IT services or an office services business of $4.8 billion. I would really, really like to know what that is. They also say that last year they bought 5 IT services companies. So during this year, they bought 5 IT services companies in Europe. But yet their sales are down 4.5%. You would think those 5 companies would have added some revenue, right? You also would realize that those 5 companies they added would add profit because they'd have a bunch of add backs. They probably cleaned those companies up. The money went to the bottom line. They say that in the year 2020, that their bottom line profit actually increased. Their operating margin increased in this sector from 5.9% to 6.7%. It increased to 0.8%. So they increased less than 1% in profit, but they bought 5 companies, and they decreased the revenue by 4.5% from the year before they bought the 5 companies. Folks, this is a little bit disturbing. They do talk about that they weren't able to sell a lot of compute hardware because of the virus. We all get that, but really? A lot of IT services companies were selling tremendous amounts of hardware as people moved into laptops. HP's personal systems blew it out of the water. You know, how many laptops they sold versus desktops had an increase in that sector. Ricoh says they couldn't sell a lot of hardware because of the pandemic. Ricoh says that we didn't sell a lot of services either because the year before they did a lot of business when customers transitioned off of Microsoft Windows 10. Folks, this is a little bit interesting to me. You know, when the demand associated with transitioning to Windows 10 solutions, sales were down. So without that, the sales were down. Ricoh, you can't wait till Microsoft changes their operating systems every few years to hope you're going to increase your sales by transitioning to people to the new platform. And in all reality, is that what you define as IT services? And if you do, how much of your revenue came from just that? How much of your revenue came from telephony? How much of your revenue came from backup services? How much of your revenue came from vendor management, from assessments? You see what's going on here, folks? They don't just dissect any of that. And now in this new year, they're lumping it all up with print. This is scary as hell. You know, it's scary as hell. You know, just by lumping it all up with print, you're going to come up with this number next year. And how do you even compare that? Folks, it's just a scary trend, and I think we got to really be careful of it in the document imaging channel. IT services, I don't know how many times I got to say this, is nothing to do with print. Print is just one little tiny component of IT services. Remember the math we talked about so many different times? If you look at IT services, all the costs for an IT infrastructure for an organization against all the costs related to printing documents and the hardware to print those documents on and the supplies, do you realize it's like 1.2% of the revenue? Doesn't matter what company, folks. Do your own office. Add up all the money you spend for all of your IT infrastructure, your backup, your ISP, all your software license. Add it all up. And then add up your printing equipment and your service contracts on your printers. It's like 1.2%. And so theoretically, by lumping all this stuff together, it's going to be very, very distracting. It's going to make Ricoh double down even more on print. I mean, I don't see this as a good thing at all. And I can't believe that Ricoh's actually doing it. They should have actually separated it even more. And then gave a financial recap, dissected, just like I want Konica to do. Until those dealers really understand those individual numbers for those individual components, how are they ever going to improve themselves? How are they ever going to know what their OEMs are actually doing? Ladies and gentlemen, these are a lot of things to think about. But in all reality, that story I shared in the beginning of this, who in their right mind would have thought they would project $1 billion less in revenue? And dealers, you can't just run around and buy each other up and think you're growing. Because every time you do that, what are you doing? You're buying declining revenue. We got to transition into IT. We got to do it profitably. We got to manage it successfully. And lumping it all together isn't the way to do it. I'm going to end this the way that I always do. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and I'll see you all tomorrow.